My name is Hannah Mitchell. I'm 35 and I serve in the U.S. Army. To my family, though, it's like I've thrown my life away. At our family reunion dinner in Raleigh, my sister leaned back and sneered. Still with that little army job, huh? Laughter exploded around the table from my parents, my aunts, even the cousins. They toasted to her million-dollar deals, her sleek office and rising empire, while I sat there with my medals zipped away in my purse, my chest tight and silent. I've commanded troops in active war zones. I've led operations worth billions. But to them, I'm just playing soldier, some kid stuck in a uniform. They never showed up. Not to my graduation from the academy, not to my promotions, not once. That night, their laughter didn't just sting, it burned. Under the table, I clenched my fist and made a quiet vow I'd make them see me. Not as the daughter they dismiss, not as the sister they overlook, but as the woman they'd never dare to underestimate again. Ever felt invisible to the people who should have believed in you? Most. Tell your story in the comments and subscribe. We rise by proving them wrong. I pulled into Raleigh after a 6-hour drive from Fort Liberty, my stomach twisting with hope and dread. This family reunion was supposed to be different. I'd spent 13 years in the Army leading missions, earning honors, but maybe they'd finally see me. The house was packed, cousins, aunts, uncles, all buzzing with chatter. I walked in wearing civilian jeans to blend in, my service medals tucked away in my purse. My sister Olivia Mitchell stood at the head of the table, her voice sharp and smug. Apex Technologies just landed a $10 million deal, she bragged, flipping her hair. My father, Richard Mitchell, beamed like she'd won a Nobel Prize. "That's my girl running the show," he said, raising his glass. My mother, Patricia Mitchell, nodded, her smile wide. "Olivia's making us proud," she added, her eyes locked on her. I sat quietly, picking at my food, waiting for a chance to speak. "Hey, I just led a major mission overseas," I said, my voice steady but hopeful, thinking they'd care. Olivia snorted, cutting me off. "What, still playing with your little army job?" The table erupted in laughter. Dad chuckled. Mom shook her head. My cousins smirked like I was a kid with a toy gun. My face burned, but I forced a tight smile, gripping my fork until my knuckles whitened. Olivia leaned forward, her eyes glinting with mockery. "Come on, Hannah. When are you getting a real career? You know, one that pays real money." Dad jumped in, not missing a beat. "She's right. Apex is working with the Department of Defense now. Big leagues, Hannah." He didn't know I was overseeing their contract from the Army's side. Neither did Olivia. They never asked. Mom turned to me, her tone sharp as a blade. "Hannah, why can't you be more like Olivia? She's building something real, not chasing badges." I swallowed hard, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. The room felt like it was closing in, their voices louder, their laughter sharper. I was invisible, a seasoned officer reduced to a punchline in my own family. Olivia raised her glass again, her smirk aimed right at me. To Apex and to family success, she toasted. Everyone clinked glasses, their cheers echoing. I stared at my plate, my anger simmering, a fire growing inside me. I'd led teams through war zones, made decisions that saved lives while they toasted Olivia's bank account. They thought I was nothing. I wasn't their little Hannah anymore. I'd show them, not with words, not with tears, but with action. I pushed my chair back, my jaw set. This wasn't over. I'd make them see who I was, and it wouldn't be at this table. As I pushed my chair back from that suffocating reunion table, my mind spiraled into the past, to the moments that carved this ache in my chest. I was 22, standing tall at my West Point graduation, my uniform crisp, my heart pounding with pride. I'd scanned the crowd for familiar faces, Dad, Mom, Olivia, but the seats I'd reserved for them were empty. I'd sent them invitations, called twice to confirm. "We're tied up with Olivia's pitch meeting," Mom had said, her voice clipped. "It's a big deal, Hannah." I stood alone, clapping for my classmates, my smile hiding the sting. They never came. Not one. Years later, at 26, I earned my first major promotion, a milestone I'd dreamed of since I was a kid. I'd invited my family to the ceremony at Fort Bragg, hoping they'd see what I'd built. I waited by the stage, scanning the crowd, my hands sweaty. No one showed. Olivia texted last minute, stuck at a client dinner. "You'll be fine." Dad didn't even call back. Mom sent a card addressed to Hannah, no mention of my rank or achievement. I pinned the new insignia on my uniform alone, my chest tight with a familiar hurt. They were always too busy with Olivia's deals, her promotions, her life. The deepest cut came at 29, deployed in Syria. I was leading a critical operation, days without sleep, my team relying on me. I got a rare chance to call home, hoping to hear Dad's voice, maybe Mom's encouragement. I dialed from a dusty outpost, the connection crackling. Dad picked up, sounding distracted. "Hannah, can it wait? Olivia's closing a major contract today." Before I could respond, he hung up. I stared at the phone, my throat burning. My work grueling, life or death missions didn't matter to them. Olivia's boardroom victories always came first. I'd tried so hard to make them proud. At 24, I sent Mom a photo of me receiving a commendation for a cyber operation. She replied, "Nice, but Olivia just got featured in Forbes." At 30, I told Dad about a successful mission that saved lives. He said, "That's great, but Olivia's running a team of 50 now." Every achievement I shared was overshadowed by Olivia's success. They never asked about my work, never visited my base, never cared. I'd spent years chasing their approval, but all I got was silence or comparisons. Back then, I'd blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe my path, grit, sacrifice, service wasn't flashy like Olivia's corner office. But that night in Raleigh, as their laughter from the reunion echoed in my head, I saw it clearly. It wasn't me. It was them. They chose Olivia's world money status deals over mine. I'd carried that weight for years, each missed milestone a scar. But I wasn't that hopeful kid anymore. I'd built a life, a career, a purpose. They'd never see it, not at my graduations, not at my ceremonies, not over that crackling call from Syria. But I'd make them see it now, not for their love, but for me. The weight of those old scars from graduations and missed calls still lingered as I drove to my parents' house a week after the reunion. I wanted to try one last time to bridge the gap. In my bag was a service medal earned during a high-stakes mission overseas, one of my proudest moments. I'd carried it for months, hoping to share it with Dad to show him what I'd built. Maybe this time, they'd see me. I pulled up to their Raleigh home, my heart pounding with a flicker of hope. Inside, the living room was quiet. Just Dad, Mom, and my sister Olivia Mitchell sipping coffee. I took a deep breath and sat down, clutching the small velvet box. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "I brought something for you." I opened the box, revealing the medal, its silver glinting faintly. "This is from a mission I led last year. It means a lot to me." I slid it toward him, my eyes searching his face. Richard Mitchell glanced at it, then pushed it back across the table. "Hannah, that's nice," he said, his tone flat, "but I don't need trinkets. Olivia's got a big presentation with Apex tomorrow. That's what matters." My chest tightened, but I kept my face, still hoping Mom would say something. Patricia Mitchell barely looked at the medal. "Hannah, honestly," she said, her voice sharp, "why do you keep bringing up this Army stuff? Olivia's closing deals that actually change things." She gestured to my sister, who smirked, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah, Hannah." Olivia said, her eyes narrowing. "Maybe save the medals for your scrapbook. I'm pitching to the Department of Defense tomorrow. Real impact." They didn't know I was the officer overseeing Apex's contract, that my work shaped their so-called real impact. I clenched my jaw, the rejection stinging like a slap. I tried again, turning to Dad. "This isn't just a medal," I said, my voice rising slightly. "It's for saving lives, for work I poured everything into." He shrugged, sipping his coffee. "Olivia's work keeps the lights on," he said, not meeting my eyes. Mom nodded, adding, You should focus on something practical like Olivia does. The room felt smaller, their words cutting deeper than any mission I'd faced. Olivia laughed a short, mocking sound. Hannah? You're wasting your time? Stick to your little army games. I stared at the metal, its weight heavy in my hands. I'd thought it could change things, make them see me not just as their daughter or sister, but as someone who'd built something real. But they didn't care. They never would. Their world revolved around Olivia's deals, her status, her bank account. My service, my sacrifices were invisible to them. I closed the box, my fingers trembling, and stood up. Fine, I said, my voice cold. You don't want this. I'll show you what I'm worth another way. I walked out, their silence following me. That moment broke something inside me, not my resolve, but my need for their approval. I wasn't chasing their pride anymore. I'd prove my value not with gifts or words, but with my actions, my career, my strength. They'd see me not here, not now, but soon, on my terms. I left my parents' house with the medal still in my bag, its weight a reminder of their rejection, but also of my resolve. I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd prove my worth through my work. Back at Fort Liberty, I threw myself into my role as an officer, determined to rise above the sting of their words. My days were filled with high-stakes cyber operations, each one a test of skill and grit. But one mission, a critical network security audit, became my breaking point. I was tasked with leading a team to secure a classified system for a Department of Defense project. The deadline was tight. The stakes enormous. One flaw could compromise national security. I'd spent weeks preparing running simulations, double-checking code. But during the final audit, a hidden vulnerability slipped through, crashing the system in front of my team and our evaluators. The room went quiet, my stomach dropping as the screen flashed red. I'd failed publicly, spectacularly. My team looked to me, waiting for direction, but I froze, the weight of my family's dismissal echoing in my head. Maybe Olivia was right. Maybe I wasn't enough. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring at the failed audit report, my confidence shattered. I was ready to call it quits when Colonel James Parker, my mentor, walked in. Hannah, he said, his voice steady. You're not the first to stumble, and you won't be the last. He sat down, his eyes sharp but kind. Failure doesn't define you. It's what you do next. I shook my head, my voice tight. Colonel Parker, I let everyone down. This was my shot. He leaned forward, unyielding. You think I got these eagles without screwing up? You fix it. You learn, you keep going. That's leadership. His words hit hard. I'd spent years proving myself to a family that didn't care, but here was someone who saw my potential. Over the next week, Colonel Parker worked with me, dissecting the audit, pinpointing the flaw, a subtle coding error I'd overlooked. We rebuilt the system line by line, testing it until it was ironclad. He didn't sugarcoat my mistakes, but he didn't let me drown in them either. You're tougher than this, Hannah, he said during one late-night session. Show them what you're made of, not your family, but yourself. When we ran the audit again, the system held. The evaluators nodded, my team cheered, and I felt a spark of pride I hadn't known in years. Colonel Parker clapped me on the shoulder. That's the officer I know, he said. I wasn't just fixing code, I was rebuilding myself. I realized then that my family's rejection didn't define me. Their words, Olivia's smirks, Dad's shrugs, Mom's comparisons were noise. My work, my growth, my strength were what mattered. That victory at Fort Liberty wasn't just about the audit. It was about learning to stand up after a fall, to lead through doubt, to trust my own worth. Colonel Parker didn't just help me fix a system, he showed me I could fix myself. I wasn't done proving my value, not to my family, but to the world I'd built here. I'd keep pushing, keep leading, keep fighting, and I'd do it for me. The victory at Fort Liberty had reignited my fire, but as December rolled in, a quiet ache settled in my chest. Christmas was coming, and the thought of another holiday with my family's judgment, Olivia's smirks, Dad's shrugs, Mom's comparisons felt unbearable. I needed something else, something real. That's when Colonel James Parker, my mentor, invited me to his family's Christmas dinner. "You're not spending the holidays alone, Hannah," he said, his voice firm. I hesitated, but his insistence won me over. I arrived at Colonel Parker's house near Fort Liberty, my nerves buzzing. Susan Parker, his wife, greeted me at the door with a warm smile. "Hannah, come in," she said, pulling me into a hug that caught me off guard. The house was filled with laughter and chatter, a stark contrast to the cold silence of my family's reunion. At the table sat Brian Carter, my teammate from the cyber unit, his grin wide as he waved me over. "About time you showed up," he teased, passing me a plate. I sat down, my shoulders easing for the first time in weeks. Colonel Parker raised a glass, his eyes steady. "To the team," he said, "and to those who've got your back." I clinked glasses with them, a warmth spreading through me. Susan leaned over, her voice soft. "Hannah, James talks about you all the time. Your family here." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Family. A word I'd chased for years, only to find it here, not in Raleigh, with Olivia's taunts or Mom's lectures. Brian shared stories of our missions, exaggerating my role in the audit fix to make me laugh. "Hannah saved the day," he said, winking. I shook my head, but Susan squeezed my hand. "You're tougher than you let on," she said. Colonel Parker nodded, adding, "She's one of the best. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Their words hit deeper than I expected, filling a void my family had left. For years I'd fought for Dad's pride, Mom's approval, Olivia's respect. But here with these people, I didn't have to prove anything. They saw me, my work, my heart, my strength. As the night went on, we swapped stories, Colonel Parker's early deployments, Susan's knack for keeping him grounded, Brian's ridiculous pranks on base. I shared a little about my missions, careful not to dwell on the pain of my family's rejection. "You ever think about going back?" Brian asked, his tone gentle. I paused, then shook my head. "They don't get it," I said. "But you all do." Susan smiled, refilling my glass. "You've got us now," she said. I felt a weight lift, a sense of belonging I hadn't known I needed. By the end of the night, I wasn't just an officer or a name on a roster. I was part of something bigger, a family that chose me, not because of blood, but because of who I was. Colonel Parker walked me out, his voice low. "Hannah, you're stronger than you know. Keep pushing." I nodded, my heart full. I'd spent too long chasing a family that didn't see me. Now I had one that did. And that was enough. The sense of belonging I'd found with Colonel Parker and my team fueled me as I dove into my biggest assignment yet. At Fort Liberty, I was tasked with overseeing a billion-dollar cybersecurity project for the Department of Defense, a contract tied to Apex Technologies, my sister's company. My role was to ensure their systems met the military's stringent standards: no leaks, no flaws, no compromises. The responsibility was immense, but after the audit victory, I felt ready. I led a team of analysts running tests, reviewing code, and coordinating with Apex's engineers. Every decision I made carried weight, and I thrived on the challenge, knowing this project could shape national security. Weeks into the project, I got a call from my mother, Patricia Mitchell. Her voice was tense, not warm. "Hannah, we need to talk," she said. I braced myself, expecting another lecture about Olivia's success. "Olivia's struggling with her Apex contract," Mom went on. "It's with the Department of Defense." "You're in the Army, can't you pull some strings?" I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. They didn't know I was the officer overseeing that very contract. I kept my tone even. "Mom, I don't do favors like that. My job is to protect the system, not bend rules." She sighed, exasperated. "Hannah, just help your sister. This is her big break." I hung up, my jaw clenched. The next day, my father, Richard Mitchell, called. Hannah, Olivia's under pressure, he said, his voice heavy with expectation. You're in the military. Do something to make this easier for her. I stared at my desk papers stacked with Apex's system specs. Dad? I said, my voice firm. I can't. My work doesn't work that way. He scoffed. You're always so rigid. Olivia's carrying the family name. Help her out. I ended the call, my heart pounding. They thought my job was a tool for Olivia's success, not a career I'd built through years of sacrifice. Then Olivia herself texted. Hey Hannah, I know you're with the Army. Can you talk to whoever's in charge of our DoD contract? It's a mess. Her casual tone, like she was asking for a coffee order, made my blood boil. I typed back, Olivia, I don't interfere with contracts. Fix it yourself. She replied with a single word, whatever. I set my phone down, my hands shaking. For years, they'd dismissed my work as a little Army job, and now they wanted me to use it to save Olivia's reputation. The irony burned. Back at Fort Liberty, I doubled down on the project. Apex's systems had vulnerabilities, sloppy code, weak encryption that my team flagged. I sent detailed reports to their engineers expecting cooperation. Instead, their lead engineer, unaware I was the oversight officer, pushed back, citing unnecessary delays. I stood my ground, insisting on fixes. My team worked late nights, stress high but morale steady. I wasn't just doing my job, I was proving my worth not to my family, but to myself and the mission. One evening, Colonel James Parker stopped by my office. Heard you're catching heat from Apex, he said, leaning against the doorframe. I nodded, exhausted. They're not happy with my standards. He chuckled. Good. Keep them honest, Hannah. You're doing what's right. His words steadied me. My family saw my work as a favor to leverage. Colonel Parker saw it as duty. I wasn't bending for Olivia or anyone else. As the project neared its deadline, I knew the real test was coming. Apex's leadership, including Olivia, would present their system at a conference in Raleigh. My team's findings would be front and center, and I'd be there to ensure the truth came out. I wasn't helping Olivia, I was holding her accountable. My family's requests had shown me one thing: they'd never respect my work until it stared them in the face. I was ready to show them, not with favors, but with results. The conference hall in Raleigh buzzed with anticipation as I adjusted my uniform medals pinned carefully to my chest. Months of grueling work on the Apex Technologies cybersecurity project had led to this moment. I wasn't here to help my sister Olivia Mitchell as my family had demanded. I was here to do my job, to ensure the system was secure, no matter whose name was on it. My team's findings, detailed in a report I clutched tightly, exposed critical flaws in Apex's work. I took a deep breath, ready to face the room, knowing my family would be there, oblivious to my role. The hall was packed with Apex executives, Department of Defense officials, and my family seated near the front. Olivia stood at the podium, her smile confident as she presented Apex's system as flawless. My father, Richard Mitchell, and my mother, Patricia Mitchell, beamed from their seats, whispering proudly about her success. I stayed in the back, unnoticed, my heart steady but my nerves electric. Olivia's slides flashed across the screen, boasting unbreakable encryption and military-grade security. I clenched my report, knowing the truth. When Olivia finished, the room applauded. Thomas Reed, Apex's CEO, stepped forward to introduce the military's evaluation. We're honored to have the officer overseeing this contract here, he said, scanning the room. I stepped forward, my boots clicking on the floor, my uniform crisp. The room turned to me, and Thomas Reed's face lit up. He stood, saluted, and said, "Colonel, welcome." The words hung in the air, sharp and clear. A gasp rippled through the crowd. My family froze. Olivia's jaw dropped. Dad's eyes widened. Mom's hands gripped her chair. Colonel. The title they'd never heard, never cared to know, now echoed in the silence. I nodded to Thomas Reed and took the podium. Thank you, Mr. Reed. I said, my voice calm but firm. My team conducted a thorough review of Apex's system. I opened my report projecting the findings on the screen. We identified multiple vulnerabilities, weak encryption, outdated protocols, and unsecured access points. These flaws pose significant risks to national security. The room stirred murmurs growing. Olivia's face went pale, her confidence crumbling. I didn't look at her. This wasn't personal. It was my duty. An executive interrupted his tone, defensive. "These standards are excessive," he said. I held his gaze. "They're necessary," I replied. "My job is to protect our nation's systems, not to cut corners." Thomas Reed nodded, his expression serious. "Colonel Mitchell, we appreciate your rigor. Apex will address these issues immediately." Olivia sank into her seat, her hands trembling. Dad and Mom stared at me, their pride for Olivia replaced by shock. They'd called my work a little army job, but now they saw the truth. As I stepped down, Olivia approached, her voice low and shaky. "Hannah, you could have warned me," she said. I met her eyes, unyielding. "Olivia, I told you to fix it yourself. My job isn't to save your reputation, it's to do what's right." She flinched, speechless. Dad stood, his face red. "Hannah, why didn't you tell us?" he asked. I paused, my chest tight. "I tried," I said. "You never listened." Mom reached out, her voice soft. "Hannah, we didn't know." I shook my head. "You didn't want to know." The conference moved on, but the air between us was heavy. My family sat in stunned silence as Thomas Reed thanked me again, his respect clear. I'd spent years chasing their approval, but in that moment I didn't need it. I'd proven my worth not to them but to myself, my team, and the mission. As I left the hall, my medals glinting under the lights, I felt lighter. Their shock was their burden, not mine. I was ready for what came next. Walking out of the Raleigh conference hall, the weight of my family's stunned silence lingered behind me. Their shock at hearing Colonel welcome wasn't my victory. It was just the final push I needed. For years I'd carried their dismissal, their preference for my sister Olivia Mitchell, like a stone in my chest. But standing there with my medals glinting and my duty clear, I knew it was time to let go. I drove to my parents' house that evening, my resolve firm, ready to say what I'd held back for too long. I found my father, Richard Mitchell, and my mother, Patricia Mitchell, in their living room, still reeling from the conference. Olivia sat across from them, her face tight with frustration. I stood in the doorway, my uniform still on, my voice steady. "I'm done," I said. "For years I tried to make you see me, my work, my sacrifices. But you never did. You chose Olivia's world over mine every time." Dad's face hardened. "Hannah, we didn't know you were a colonel," he said, his tone defensive. I shook my head. "You didn't know because you never asked." Olivia stood, her voice sharp. "Hannah, you embarrassed me today," she said. "You could have helped me, but you threw me under the bus." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Olivia, I did my job. You wanted favors, not fairness. That's not who I am." Mom reached out, her eyes pleading. "Hannah, we're family. We can fix this." But her words felt hollow. "No, Mom," I said, my throat tight. "Family doesn't ignore you, belittle you, or demand you bend your principles. I'm done chasing your approval." The silence that followed was heavy, final. I turned and walked out, their voices fading behind me. That night, I packed my things and made a decision. Fort Liberty had been my home, but a new assignment was waiting in Arlington, Virginia, near the Pentagon. It was a fresh start, a chance to build a life free from the shadows of their expectations. By week's end, I'd loaded my car and driven north, the Raleigh skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror. Arlington felt different, open, unburdened. I settled into a small apartment, my medals and commendations arranged on a shelf, not for anyone else, but for me. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work, leading cybersecurity initiatives, with a clarity I hadn't felt before. I thought about Colonel James Parker, my mentor, who'd seen my strength when my family couldn't. I thought about Susan Parker, his wife, and my teammate Brian Carter, who'd welcomed me as family at that Christmas dinner. They were the ones who mattered, the ones who'd chosen me, not out of obligation, but because they saw who I was. My family's absence no longer stung. It was their loss, not mine. Looking back, I realized the lesson wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. My worth wasn't in their praise or Olivia's shadow. It was in the missions I'd led, the lives I'd protected, the team I'd built. I'd spent years thinking I needed their validation to feel whole, but I was whole all along. My strength, my purpose, my life. They were mine, forged through every challenge, every choice, every step I took alone. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. Thank you to Colonel Parker, Susan, and Brian for showing me what family really means. Thank you to my team at Fort Liberty for standing by me. And thank you to all of you listening for being part of this story. If it resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell me what's your story of finding your worth. I'm reading everyone.
My name is Amy Whittingham, and I'm 32 years old. For as long as I can remember, people have described me with words like steady, dependable, predictable. To some, those sound boring. But to me, steadiness has always been strength. I believe in keeping my promises in quiet acts of devotion that speak louder than grand gestures. That's how I love Philip. We'd been together for 5 years. He was a painter, restless, passionate, a man who left unfinished canvases leaning against the walls of our apartment. He could make a room shift with his presence, laughter spilling out like a dare. Where I was the anchor, Philip was the storm. And I believed, perhaps foolishly, that we balanced each other. He once told me I was the calm after his hurricanes. I thought that was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. So when I decided to propose, I wanted the ring to capture the essence of us. Not flashy, not ordinary, but something with soul. I spent weekends wandering antique shops, running my fingers across velvet trays of rings, searching for one that spoke to me. And then I found it. A vintage ring from the 1920s, delicate filigree carved into the band, a diamond that caught the light like it was hiding a secret. It wasn't massive, but it was timeless, elegant. I paid more than I could comfortably afford, draining a large part of my savings. But in my heart, it wasn't a purchase. It was an investment in the life we would build together. I planned every detail of the proposal. A quiet evening at home, his favorite meal, simmering in the kitchen pasta with cream sauce and roasted garlic bread, a bottle of red wine breathing on the table. Candles lit their warm glow, flickering against the unfinished canvases around us. When dinner was finished, I told him to close his eyes. My pulse thundered so loudly it drowned out the soft hum of music in the background. I slipped the velvet box from my pocket, lowered myself onto one knee, and whispered, "Open them." His eyes opened, and for one suspended breath, time froze. His gaze dropped to the ring, then flicked up to me, and that's when I saw it. A flicker, small, fleeting, but undeniable. Not surprise, not joy, something sharper, colder. A twitch of his mouth, a narrowing of his eyes, something that looked dangerously close to contempt. But then, just as quickly, it vanished. His face lit up with a wide, dazzling smile, and he said my name with a tremble in his voice. "Amy, it's beautiful. Yes, of course, yes." Relief crashed over me in a wave so strong it left me dizzy. My hand shook as I slid the ring onto his finger. He pulled me into his arms, warm and triumphant, and for that moment, all I felt was love. We spent the rest of the night tangled on the couch, dreaming aloud about the life we would build. Philip painted pictures with his words. A bigger studio, exhibitions overseas, children with paint it smudged on their fingers. I added my own details, slow mornings with coffee and laughter, quiet evenings under oak trees, the comfort of knowing we had each other to come home to. But beneath the laughter, beneath the clinking of glasses and the warmth of his arms around me, unease stirred like a shadow I couldn't ignore. That flicker on his face when he first saw the ring, was it real? Or had I imagined it? For weeks afterward, Philip wore the ring every day. He showed it off to his friends, posted a photo of it online with the caption, "The next chapter begins." His followers flooded the comments with congratulations. I felt like the luckiest woman alive. Until the night I came home and noticed his hand was bare. It was a Tuesday. He was sprawled on the couch, scrolling his phone, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. I leaned against the doorway, heart thumping. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. "Where's your ring?" He didn't even look up. "Oh, I had to get it resized. It was a little loose." The words sounded casual enough, but something in his tone twisted in my chest. The ring had fit perfectly when I slipped it onto his finger. Still, I forced a smile and nodded, pushing away the unease. But the next day it wasn't back. And the day after that. By the end of the week, I found myself staring at his empty hand at night, my stomach knotting tighter with each passing day. I told myself not to nag, not to seem insecure, but silence only made the weight heavier. Finally, one evening, as he lay beside me in bed scrolling through his phone, I whispered, "Philip, the ring." The jeweler said resizing only takes a day or two. He froze, then sighed, lowering his phone onto his chest. He didn't meet my eyes when he spoke. "Amy, I didn't get it resized." His voice was flat. "It's not with the jeweler." My chest went cold, my mouth went dry. "Then where is it?" He sat up slowly, his shoulders tense. "I sold it." The words struck like a physical blow, hollowing me out in an instant. I thought I had misheard. "You sold it?" My voice was barely a whisper. His eyes flashed with something that wasn't shame. It was defiance. "She needed me. You don't get it." The she hung in the air like a knife. My lips trembled. "Who, Amelia?" he said at last. His ex. The woman he had once spoken about with a reverence that made me uneasy. She's in trouble, legal trouble. She didn't have anyone else to turn to. My heart thudded painfully, but my voice remained eerily calm. "So you sold the ring I gave you for her?" His jaw tightened. "It wasn't about the ring. You don't understand Amy. You've never had to fight for love. You're too easy to love. Amelia's broken, and I wanted to be the one to rescue her." The words lodged in my chest like shards of glass. Too easy to love. I stared at him, and for the first time I saw him clearly. Not the storm, not the muse, not the man I thought I was building a life with. Just a boy addicted to chaos, mistaking destruction for passion. I didn't argue, I didn't scream. Instead, I rose quietly, walked to the closet, and pulled out a duffel bag. Into it, I packed only my wallet, my phone, and my car keys. Philip's face twisted with confusion. He had expected a fight. He had expected tears, accusations, maybe even forgiveness. What he hadn't expected was silence. At the door, I paused my hand on the knob. My voice came out calm, almost detached. "You won't save her, Philip. You'll lose everything. And I won't be here when it happens." Then I stepped into the night, closing the door softly behind me. For the first time in years, the silence belonged only to me. The night I left, the city air felt sharper than usual, carrying a chill that seeped through my thin coat. My duffel bag thudded against my hip with every step, light enough to remind me how little I was taking, heavy enough to remind me of what I had lost. I checked into a short-term rental the next morning. The apartment was small, with peeling wallpaper and blinds that clattered against the window whenever the wind picked up. The refrigerator hummed a lonely tune, and the furniture looked like it had been dragged in from a secondhand store. It wasn't home, not yet. It was a cocoon, sterile, silent temporary. But at least it was mine. In the days that followed, I lived like a ghost, haunting a new life. I went to work, smiled when colleagues asked about weekend plans, and came back to the hollow apartment each night. I ate microwave dinners under the weak yellow light, stared at the white walls, and listened to the faint arguments of neighbors bleeding through paper-thin walls. And every night I replayed his words, "You're too easy to love." At first, they stung like acid poured on open skin, but soon they dulled into something stranger clarity. Philip hadn't meant to give me a gift when he said it, but in some twisted way he had. He had revealed the truth. My love wasn't lacking. He was. Still, clarity didn't erase the ache. I'd close my eyes at night and see the proposal replayed in fragments. The flicker of disappointment when he first saw the ring, the forced smile, the words that tasted like lies. Then came the echo of his confession. I sold it. The ring hadn't just been jewelry. It had been my vow, my sacrifice, my symbol of us. And he had pawned it off for Amelia, the ex who thrived in chaos and pulled him toward destruction like a moth to flame. Some nights I'd almost convince myself to call him, to demand an explanation, to scream at him until my throat bled. My fingers would hover over his name in my contacts, but each time I stopped. What was there left to hear? That Amelia was different. That I didn't get it. That my steadiness was a flaw. No, I refused to give him that satisfaction. I started cooking again, not for us, but for me. My first attempt, a lemon chicken dish, came out charred and bitter. I laughed for the first time in weeks as I scraped the blackened edges into the trash. The next night I tried again, and the night after that. With every meal, I began reclaiming my kitchen, reclaiming my space. On weekends, I dusted off my old camera. Photography had once been a quiet passion of mine, something Philip used to dismiss as a hobby for people who don't have real ambition. But when I pressed the shutter and captured the way sunlight spilled over an abandoned bench, I felt something stir in me. I started walking through the city with my camera, framing lives that weren't mine. An elderly couple holding hands on a park bench, a street musician lost in his music, children chasing pigeons across the square. Ordinary scenes, but seen through my lens, they felt extraordinary. I uploaded a few online. To my surprise, strangers noticed. "This feels raw," one comment read. "There's warmth in your perspective," another said. Small words, but they filled me with more validation than Philip ever had. But the nights were still the hardest. I'd lie awake staring at the cracked ceiling, haunted by the silence Philip left behind. That silence wasn't peaceful, it was hollow, demanding. My mind whispered cruel questions. What if you'd been more exciting? What if you'd fought harder to keep him? What if steadiness was never enough? One evening, 3 months after I'd left, I came home to find an envelope slipped under my door. The handwriting was messy, rushed, but I knew it instantly. Philip. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. "Amy, please, I made a mistake. She's gone. I was wrong. I need you." I read it twice, waiting for a flood of emotions. Anger, maybe. Sadness. Relief. But none of it came. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. I folded the letter neatly and tucked it into the drawer of my nightstand. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, listening to the rain tapping against the glass. Philip's world was collapsing, and for once it wasn't my problem. The irony was sharp enough to taste. He had called my love too easy. Sold my ring to save someone who had no intention of being saved, and now he was begging for the one thing he had dismissed me. I whispered into the quiet, "This isn't my burden anymore." And for the first time since walking away, I believed it. Because love that demands you abandon yourself isn't love at all. Time lost its shape after I left Philip. Days melted into weeks, weeks into months. I no longer marked life by holidays or birthdays, but by the groceries I bought, the rent due each month, the stack of books I piled on the nightstand without finishing. At first, the silence was unbearable. The apartment felt sterile, like a hotel room no one bothered to decorate. No photos on the walls, no worn cushions, shaped by love, no faint smell of garlic and rosemary clinging to the air. Just blankness. And yet, that blankness was better than the noise of betrayal. Still, I haunted the place like a ghost. I'd go to work, smile at coworkers' nod through their small talk. Then I'd return home, heat a microwave meal, and sit in the quiet. I told myself it was temporary, that I was just surviving. But survival has its own weight. At night, lying in bed, I would replay his words, "You're too easy to love." The sentence wrapped around my chest like a chain. He'd said it with disdain, as if loyalty and steadiness were sins. At first, I believed him. Maybe I was too plain. Maybe love was supposed to be fiery, full of chaos and grand rescues. But each time the memory replayed, something inside me shifted. Slowly, painfully, I began to see the truth. My love wasn't the problem. His hunger for destruction was. Still, the wound lingered. I'd close my eyes and remember the look on his face when I proposed, the flicker of disappointment, the contempt he tried to mask. Then I'd remember his confession I sold it. The ring had been more than metal and stone. It was months of searching a chunk of my savings, a symbol of the life I wanted with him. He had pawned it off like it was nothing, trading our future for Amelia's chaos. And that was the hardest part. Not the loss of the ring, but the realization that our love had always been less valuable to him than his addiction to broken things. One night, I stood in the kitchen holding my phone. His name glowed on the screen. My thumb hovered over the call button, tempted by the urge to scream to demand answers. But I stopped. I knew exactly what he would say, that I didn't understand, that Amelia needed him, that passion mattered more than stability. I put the phone down and let the silence stay. Instead, I found new rituals. I started cooking again. Not the meals Philip loved, but ones I chose for myself. Dishes full of spices he had once complained about, desserts he'd dismissed as too sweet. My first attempt, a lemon tart, collapsed in the oven. I laughed for the first time in weeks as I scraped it into the trash. The second try came out better. and by the third, I was proud. Each dish tasted like reclamation. I dusted off my old camera, too. For years, Philip had dismissed photography as a hobby without ambition. But when I pressed the shutter capturing the way morning light curved across the cracked pavement, something stirred in me. I wandered the city with my camera. I framed children, chasing pigeons, street musicians lost in their songs, vendors, stacking fruit into pyramids. None of it was extraordinary, but in the stillness of each shot, I saw beauty again. I uploaded a few photos online, nervous but curious. To my surprise, strangers responded, "This feels alive. Your perspective is warm." Those small affirmations filled me more than Philip's approval ever had. But nights still carried their shadows. Lying awake, I'd hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sirens, the neighbor's muffled television. In that stillness, doubts whispered, what if leaving was weakness? What if another woman would have stayed? What if love only matters when it's hard? The questions carved into me, but then I remembered Philip's words again. Too easy to love. And for the first time, I realized something: love isn't supposed to be hard to the point of breaking. Real love should never demand you abandon yourself. 3 months in, I found an envelope under my door. The handwriting was messy, but unmistakable. Philip. My pulse quickened as I unfolded the paper. Amy, please, I made a mistake. She's gone. I was wrong. I need you. The words stared back at me. I waited for my heart to clench, for my throat to close, for the ache of longing to return, but none of it came. Instead, I felt nothing. Not hatred, not love, just a calm, cool emptiness. I folded the letter and tucked it into my nightstand drawer without replying. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. For the first time since leaving, I understood his downfall wasn't my burden. His choices weren't mine to fix. The ring might have been sold, but its meaning wasn't gone. It lived in the silence I had claimed in the meals I cooked for myself, in the photographs hanging on my wall. I whispered into the dark, I'm free. And for the first time, I almost believed it. It was late afternoon when Jessica's name flashed on my phone. For months, she'd sent small updates, never quite letting me forget Philip's shadow. Usually I ignored them, but this time, against my better judgment, I answered. Amy, she breathed, her tone a mix of urgency and weariness. It's worse than you think. I leaned back against the couch, one hand cradling a mug of tea gone lukewarm. Go on. Her words spilled quickly, as if saying them fast might soften the blow. It wasn't legal trouble, Amelia. She was lying. The whole thing was a scam. She told Philip she needed money for a lawyer, but she was already wanted in 2 states. She's a professional con artist. She drained him and disappeared. I closed my eyes. The tea in my hand felt suddenly heavy. Jessica kept going. The police even showed up at his place looking for her. And now Philip's under investigation too, because she ran money through his accounts. He's a mess. I didn't respond right away. The words didn't sting. They didn't even surprise me. Instead, they slid into me like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Of course. Of course Amelia had been a scam. The irony was almost too perfect. He gave her everything, Jessica whispered. His savings, his credit cards, loans he pulled out in his name. And of course the ring. My chest tightened, but not with grief. The ring had been gone the moment he chose her. The moment he chose chaos over commitment. Jessica hesitated. He's been trying to call you. He says you're the only one who can understand him. The only one who can help. A hollow laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. Of course he does. Amy, please, he's falling apart. I shifted in my seat, letting her words hang. Jessica, listen carefully. I said, my voice even. Philip didn't stumble into this. He walked into it. He chose her. He chose destruction. He sold the ring I gave him, not for survival, not for necessity, but for a fantasy. That's not a mistake. That's who he is. And I won't rescue him. On the other end, Jessica fell silent. I softened my tone. I know you care about him, but I don't owe him anything. Not anymore. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. I thought you should know. Thank you, I said simply, and hung up. For a long time, I just sat there in the quiet. The setting sun spilled orange across the walls, catching on the framed photos I had taken, moments of strangers' slices of life. They looked back at me like reminders. This is your world now, not his. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Philip had looked at me steady and loyal and called my love too easy. He had sold away our future for the illusion of passion, for the thrill of saving someone who never wanted to be saved. And now he was left with nothing but debt, shame, and empty hands. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. I didn't need to open it to know who it was. I deleted it without reading. Because what could he possibly say? That he was sorry. That he loved me now that Amelia was gone. That he finally realized what I had given him. None of it mattered. Jessica called again a few nights later. This time, her voice carried something like pity. Amy, his family won't help him. They're done. His friends, too. No one wants to be around him anymore. He's completely alone. I stood by my window, watching the city lights blink awake one by one. That was his choice, I said quietly. You don't feel anything, she asked. I thought about it. Did I satisfaction triumph anger? No, I said finally. I feel nothing. And that's how I know I'm free. Because indifference is heavier than anger. It's the final severing of the cord. After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the table with my photographs spread out before me. A street violinist, a child blowing soap bubbles, an old man smoking under a neon sign. The ring was gone. The future I thought I wanted was gone. But in its place was something better, the clarity of knowing I had escaped. I raised the glass in a quiet toast to the empty room. You got what you wanted, Philip, and I got what I needed. The silence that followed was no longer suffocating. It was mine. Once word of Philip's downfall spread, the silence I had built for myself began to crack. Not because I let him in, but because others tried to force him back into my life. The first call came from Jessica. Her voice, usually brisk, sounded weary. Amy, she said, I know you don't want to hear this, but could you just talk to him? One conversation. He's unraveling. You were always the one who grounded him. I stared at the photographs on my wall, snapshots of strangers living unremarkable but beautiful lives. My life was finally starting to look like them, quiet, ordinary, peaceful. Jessica, I said, steady as stone, that's not my job anymore. You don't understand, she pressed. He's not eating. He's drinking too much. Then he needs help, I interrupted, but not from me. The silence that followed was sharp, heavy. Then she muttered, You're colder than I thought, and hung up. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, another call came, this time from Marcus, one of Philip's friends, who had always looked at me like I was a leash around his wild, untamed buddy. Amy, he barked, skipping any greeting. Look, you need to stop being stubborn. Philip messed up, but he loves you. You can't just abandon someone like that. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Abandon? I echoed, my tone sharp. He abandoned me the moment he sold the ring. Marcus scoffed. It was a mistake. Everyone makes them. A mistake is burning dinner, I shot back. Selling an engagement ring to bail out your ex isn't a mistake. It's a betrayal. Don't call me again. I hung up before he could answer. But the worst call came 3 nights later. Linda, Philip's mother. If Marcus was blunt and Jessica was pleading, Linda was calculated. Amy, she said smoothly, her voice dripping with false warmth. It's Linda. I'm sure you've heard about Philip's situation. I have, I said flatly. Well, then you know he needs you. He thought he was helping someone, and yes, he made a mistake. But a woman like you, steady, dependable, you're supposed to stand by your man when things get hard. Her words sliced deep, not because I believed them, but because they revealed exactly how she had always seen me. Not as a partner, not as a person, as a utility. With respect, I said carefully, he didn't just make a mistake. He sold my ring to chase chaos. He chose Amelia over me. He chose destruction. That's not something I can or will rescue him from. Linda's voice sharpened. You're cruel, heartless. I always knew you weren't enough for him. For a moment, I almost faltered. Almost. But then I felt something else rise, clarity. If being enough means sacrificing my self-respect to fix his disasters, I said, my voice clear and steady, then you're right. I'll never be enough. And thank God for that. Before she could reply, I ended the call. My hands trembled as I set the phone down, but not from fear. From release. For years I had played the polite partner, careful not to upset Linda's cutting tongue. But now the leash was gone. That night I blocked her number. Then I blocked Marcus, then Jessica. One by one I cut away the voices trying to drag me backward. And with every block I felt lighter. The next morning I walked into my apartment and saw it with new eyes. The photographs on the wall glowed in the soft morning light. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon from the bread I had baked. A plant on the windowsill unfurled a new leaf stretching toward the sun. This wasn't exile anymore. It was home. For so long I had feared that leaving Philip made me cold, heartless, unworthy of love. But as the days passed and the calls dwindled to nothing, I realized the truth. Walking away had been the bravest thing I'd ever done. I hadn't abandoned him. I had chosen myself. And for the first time in my life, that choice felt like enough. By late summer, my life no longer felt like a patchwork of survival. It began to feel like mine again. The apartment that once echoed with sterile emptiness now pulsed with small signs of growth. Photographs lined the walls in mismatched frames, street musicians, children, splashing in fountains, the quiet dignity of an old man selling roses by the subway. My kitchen carried the warm scent of bread more often than not, and a stubborn green plant on the windowsill stretched higher each week, defying my inconsistent watering. I had learned to fill the silence not with Philip's chaos, but with my own presence. My photography gained momentum slowly, then all at once. What began as strangers leaving comments online turned into invitations. Small community exhibits, requests to photograph birthdays, even office colleagues asking me to capture their families. The first time someone handed me money for a print, I sat in my kitchen with the envelope in my hands, crying softly. Not because of the cash, but because someone had seen value in what I created, in me. I never posted about it on social media. I didn't send updates to mutual friends. This success wasn't about proving anything to Philip or anyone else. It was about reclaiming myself brick by brick, frame by frame. And then one evening at a local gallery, I met him. His name was Adrian Everett. He wasn't loud, wasn't the kind of man who demanded attention when he entered a room. He lingered near my photographs longer than anyone else, quiet and contemplative. When I finally approached him, unsure whether he was simply being polite, he looked at me and said, "These feel patient, like they're waiting for the world to notice what's already there." His words startled me. No one had ever described my work that way. "Patient?" I asked, testing the word on my tongue. He nodded, his smile understated but genuine. "There's strength in patience. Most people miss it." Something shifted inside me, a warmth blooming where doubt had long lingered. We talked until the gallery lights dimmed and the staff began sweeping the floor. Unlike Philip, who had once spun chaotic fantasies of broken muses and storms, to chase Adrian spoke about his work in architecture. His eyes lit up when he described restoring old buildings, preserving what still stood instead of tearing it down to start fresh. There was no arrogance in his voice, no hunger for drama, just quiet pride in shaping stability. Over the next few weeks, we met for coffee, then dinners. Our conversations stretched late into the night, not because either of us was trying to impress, but because curiosity unfolded naturally between us. It was easy, not the too easy Philip had once sneered about. Easy in the way a steady rhythm makes your heart beat calmly. Easy like breathing after you've held it for too long. One night we passed a bookstore together. In the window, a sign read, "Patience is also a form of action." Adrian paused, staring at it. Then he turned to me, his eyes soft. "That reminds me of you." For a moment, my throat tightened. Old wounds whispered too easy to love, but I pushed them aside. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," he said simply. I didn't rush things. I didn't leap into declarations or dream up futures too quickly, but slowly I let him in. We cooked together in my small kitchen, laughing when we ruined pancakes. He carried my camera bag without complaint on long walks, never once making me feel like my passion was small. He didn't need me to bleed for him to feel alive. And for the first time, I realized something vital. Philip hadn't been entirely wrong when he said my love was easy. He had just misunderstood. It wasn't easy because it was shallow. It was easy because it was real. Because I didn't require chaos to keep it alive. Because I gave without calculation. That wasn't weakness. That was strength. One Sunday morning, I woke with sunlight spilling across the photographs on my wall. Adrian was asleep beside me, breathing softly, his arm draped over my waist. I studied his face in the quiet and felt no fear, no gnawing dread of betrayal. What I felt was peace. I understood then that I had built something sturdier than any ring, sturdier than any vow Philip had once dismissed. A foundation no one could sell, no one could steal. A foundation I had built myself. It was almost a year after I walked away when the past finally forced its way back into my life. Alex, a mutual friend, invited me to a small get-together. I hesitated, worried about walking into old shadows. But Alex assured me, "Don't worry. No one defends him anymore. Everyone knows what he did." So I went. The evening was warm, the air thick with the faint smell of autumn leaves. Inside, Alex's apartment buzzed with easy laughter. I stood in the kitchen with Adrian talking about a hilariously bad movie we had seen the week before. His hand brushed mine as he reached for a drink, steady and unassuming, and I felt that familiar sense of calm. And then the room fell silent. The front door opened, and there he was. Philip. But not the Philip I remembered. This Philip looked hollow. His clothes hung loose, his hair unkempt, his face drawn and pale. The restless energy that had once made people orbit around him had vanished, leaving only desperation in its place. His eyes found me immediately. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the awkward stares and whispers. The hum of conversation died, replaced by the sound of his footsteps closing in. "Amy," he said when he reached me. His voice cracked hoarse and broken. "I've been trying to find you." I looked at him calmly, my expression unreadable. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was simply still. "I need to talk to you," he pleaded, his hands trembling. "Please. I know I hurt you. I know I said terrible things. But I've lost everything. I don't have anyone else." The room was silent, all eyes on us. I lifted my glass, took a slow sip, and set it down before answering. "That's a shame," I said softly. "I hope you figure it out." His face twisted with panic. "You can't just say that. Amy, I loved you. I still love you. You were." His voice broke. "You were the best thing I ever had." I tilted my head, studying him like one of my photographs. "Funny. I don't remember you saying that when you sold the ring I gave you." Gasps rippled through the room, but my tone remained calm, almost detached. "You don't understand," Philip stammered. "I thought I was saving her. I thought—" "You thought wrong." The words landed like stones. He flinched, his shoulders collapsing inward. "You told me I was too easy to love," I continued, my voice steady. "Do you remember that?" He swallowed hard, shame flickering across his face. "You said I didn't know what it meant to rescue someone. But here's the truth. You didn't want love. You wanted chaos. You wanted someone to bleed for you so you could feel alive." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "And in the end, that's exactly what you got. Chaos. Destruction. Emptiness." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Adrian's hand found mine, warm and grounding. His presence reminded me of where I stood now, of the life I had built without Philip, the love I had discovered that didn't demand suffering. I looked back at the man who had once held my heart. "You told me I'd never understand what it meant to be rescued," I said quietly. "But you were wrong. When you sold that ring, you did rescue me. You freed me from a future that would have destroyed me. You saved me from you." His face crumpled, shame and disbelief battling in his eyes. "I didn't mean it," he whispered. "Those things I said, you're not too easy to love. You're everything. I see it now." I shook my head, a humorless smile tugging at my lips. "You see it too late." And then with deliberate calm, I turned my back on him. I walked back toward Adrian, toward my friends, toward the life I had built brick by brick. Adrian squeezed my hand, a silent affirmation, and together we moved back into the flow of conversation. Behind me, Philip stood frozen alone in the silence he had created. But the silence I carried with me wasn't his anymore. It was mine, and it was the sound of freedom.